Hello people, and welcome to Crypto Exposed. Ripple and XRP adoption crucial to meeting G20 cross-border payment goals. Okay guys, let's get into it. Okay, some good news here that we've got, and that's very happy for me to say, because sometimes when I'm always doing combating the hype stuff, it, feels like I'm always being a little bit negative, and I want people to understand I am an XRP holder when it's all said and done, so I'm very bullish on XRP overall. I just want to, push the truth to you guys. That's all my real job is here. So, this one is one that I'm pretty much happy to report on. I've got a little caveat, so I hope you don't all sigh at that point. Where, yeah, I've got a little caveat that I want to add into this, but overall, I think this is really good to see. So, let's get into the main thing here. I'm not going to read the article or anything like that. Let's just get to the nitty gritty of what we're talking here. So, we've got a report, and it's in regards to the G20 talking about their goals for faster payments. And so, here we've got how things could be improved in regards to making payments basically better, like trying to meet their goals. So what could US domestic payments providers do to support the G20 2027 and 2030 targets? So they say, 1. Improve transparency. Lack of transparency in cross-border payments leads to unpredictable costs and delays. Offer real-time tracking of cross-border payments via solutions like SWIFT, GPI, and blockchain, and provide customers with upfront visibility of exchange rates, fees, and delivery times. Promote inter-industry collaboration. A collaborative ecosystem ensures alignment with global initiatives and technological advances. Partner with fintechs and startups innovating in cross-border payments such as RippleNet and Stellar. So that's the one that you wanted to hear there. Educate and engage stakeholders. Stakeholder alignment is critical for achieving widespread adoption of improved systems. Educate corporate clients and end users on the benefits of modernized cross-border payment solutions. Okay, so this is great to see. Of course, you can see RippleNet getting mentioned there, along with Stellar, so they both are getting mentioned. And look, overall, this is obviously a huge positive. But the one thing I want to say here, this says US domestic payments, right? Which basically means it's all within America. I'm just going to be completely honest with you, and I just have to add this little caveat in. This is what I wanted to say. Like, if we're talking US domestic payments, so I mean payments all within the US, if you notice, they said RippleNet. They didn't say XRP here. And I've mentioned this to people before. You can use RippleNet, but not use XRP, right? So RippleNet is basically like the messaging system, and then XRP is the bridge currency. So RippleNet is basically like SWIFT. So SWIFT is more like a messaging system, right? They don't really deal with the settlement part. And that's what like RippleNet is. It's like their version of SWIFT. And so if you're talking to me about this being US domestic faster payments, I think they're more likely going to use RLUSD than they would XRP. Why do I say that? Well, if you're thinking about XRP, right, we're talking about cross-border payments. Now, if they're talking about international payments and not just US domestic payments, then I'll completely change my stance on this, right? So let me just add that in there. But if we're talking US domestic payments, you're not going to bridge dollars to dollars, right? Because cross-border payments is, going international. So going from like, the pound, the Great British Pounds, to the US dollar, for example, right? You're not going to really bridge dollars to dollars, because what you're doing is you're actually adding more friction to the payment, right? Because what you'd have to do, you have the dollar, it then buys into XRP and then sells into the dollar again. Whereas if you just keep using the dollar, nothing has changed. It's not had to use XRP in any way, shape or form, because it's still the dollar. See what I mean? Now, if it's cross-border payments we're talking, I absolutely agree. XRP would be the choice for this. But if we're talking domestic payments, yeah, I think they would more than likely just use RLUSD, because they don't need a bridge currency for doing dollars to dollars. It's the same thing. It's the same currency. It's the dollar, right? So that's the one thing that I do want to just say here. And the other thing I will just say is, and let me just, sorry, before I move on, let me just say, that is still a positive, by the way, for XRP, if they use RLUSD. So I just want to make that clear, because XRP is still the gas token. So XRP is still being utilized, Now, would it be better if they were using XRP? Yeah, of course. But let's just be honest. Like, let's be realistic here and reasonable. It wouldn't make sense for them to use XRP if we're just talking domestic payments, US domestic payments. If it's going to be international, I think XRP is the logical choice, 100%. It wouldn't make sense to use RLUSD if you're going to do an international payment. But if you're talking about US domestic, then yeah, I think RLUSD is the more obvious choice, in my opinion, the more logical choice. But yeah, I will say this, like, XRP is still used as the gas token. So even if they were using RLUSD instead, it still is going to benefit XRP. Yeah, not as much as if XRP was directly used, but still to a point where XRP is being utilized. So it's still going to benefit XRP and the XRP ledger ecosystem. Okay, so it is still a positive overall. And the other thing that I just wanted to touch on with this is, like, you see the targets here. It's to get to the 2027 and 2030 targets. And so the reason why I'm kind of pointing that out is just because, you know, there's a lot of influencers who talk about, you know, XRP is going to blast off this year. It's going to go to $10,000 and all that kind of stuff, and all of the ISO talk. And this is where I've tried to show you, like, for you guys who, like, really believe in that stuff, here's like a documentation where you can see the targets are a lot more long term, right? And so, you know, I'm not doing this to be like calling people out. Like, I just want to say, like, if you look at this, the targets are, you know, in the future, basically, you know. And so the reason why I'm just saying this is because I know there's people who believe XRP is going to take off this year and go to, like, you know, these $10,000 numbers and stuff like that. I'm just trying to show you, like, even if we start talking about it from a utility aspect, these are targets that are going into 2030. And this is why I say to you guys, even if you want to believe that stuff, you might want to have a bit more of a long-term mind frame. Now, for me personally, I just don't think those prices are going to happen point blank. I will just be honest, not like $10,000. But if we are talking about, like, you know, just greater value appreciation in general, then yeah, like, I think whatever you think, right? Like, my greater long-term appreciation might be, for example, like $100, for example, whereas yours might be $10,000, whatever. But we're both talking in higher value. So that's subjective as to whatever you deem higher value, but let's just talk in the context of higher value. You want to have a longer-term mindset. You know, you really want to have a longer-term mindset, because this isn't going to happen overnight. And to me, I would think that would be evident from this point anyway, because it's not, this whole flip the switch thing that's been talked about for years hasn't happened. And the reason why it hasn't happened is because it's not going to happen. You know, all this, they're delaying the lawsuit because they're waiting for it to take off. And, you know, the banks are all just there ready and waiting. They're just waiting on the button to be pushed. It's nothing like that. You know, Ripple have already got 300 partnerships with banks and institutions already who are currently using XRP. So they're not hiding it. They're not trying to, you know, basically, you know, act like they're waiting for this button to be pushed. They're just using it. And they continue to make more partnerships and continue to grow their business. And that's what will happen. It will just happen over time. And so I'm just showing you this to show you that even if you want to believe in the high targets, you might want to give yourself just a bit more of a long-term mindset. That's all, you know, because you can see here, like, this isn't something that they're saying is going to happen tomorrow. They're not saying it's something that's going to happen 2025. You're looking a few years onwards, you know. So I hope this is just a bit more of like a reality check as well. But look, overall, is this good? Yeah, absolutely. You know, like, as I said, even if they just use RippleNet and they don't use XRP directly, you know, they use RLUSD, for example, that is still going to benefit XRP. It is. So, you know, that's still going to be huge for them. But you have got to understand, RippleNet is separate to XRP. It is two different things. It doesn't have to use XRP to use RippleNet. So, while I do deem this a huge positive, just understand it's not directly impacting XRP depending on who uses it. So, for example, if you've got China using it, they might not use XRP at all. So let's say China use it for their domestic payments, it's all within China. They're probably not going to use XRP at all. And they're not going to use RLUSD because RLUSD is pegged to the dollar. So they're probably not going to want to use the dollar, right? They're going to want to use their own currency. So in that regard, they'll probably just use their own currency unless they get like their own, digital, like their own stablecoin currency or something like that, then they'll use that instead. But that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the XRP ledger that's used in that regard, right? It could be something different. So this is where I'm just trying to make you understand like the real ins and outs of this. But hey, like, as I say, I don't want this to be a negative video. It is overall a positive. It's great to see that the recognition is there. It's great to see that this is looking like Ripple are one of the top names when it comes to cross-border payments, which is what we'd expect, right? But yeah, like I think overall we should be happy with this. This is good to see, because where it's going to be possible for XRP to be benefiting from this, it will, right? Where it's possible, it will. So when you're talking about cross-border payments, I think eventually XRP will be used as like the more preferred option, because it just makes sense. It's faster, it's cheaper. It's just going to be, you know, more scalable, more secure. It's just going to be like the more logical choice over time. So I do see that happening. But yeah, like, as I say, you've also got that Swift GPI as well. The one thing I will just say about that, like, they have got competition. And the one thing I will say, like, I'll quickly look them up just to understand what the Swift GPI was. So here it says Swift GPI lets you make high-speed cross-border payments in minutes or seconds. Nearly 60% of Swift GPI payments are credited to beneficiaries within 30 minutes and almost 100% within 24 hours. So there was a lot of like contradiction there. I really was confused, because it says Swift GPI lets you make high-speed cross-border payments in minutes or seconds, but then it says 60% are credited to the end beneficiary within 30 minutes. So I don't know if it's like the settlement aspect is different maybe, and then almost 100% within 24 hours. So I didn't really get it. Like, is it minutes? Is it seconds? Or is it 30 minutes? Or, you know, like, I get that there can be differences, but I don't know. It was a bit confusing to me. But this is one thing that I will say, right? You might look at this and say, well, you know, they said within 30 minutes, XRP can do it in seconds. Well, first and foremost, they did say minutes or seconds. So again, they are mentioning that too. But secondly, what you have got to understand is Swift has huge first mover advantage over Ripple and XRP in that regard, right? Swift is made up of like 11,000 banks. And so it's one of those things where I do think Ripple will continue to get more customers and more clients over time. I do think that will happen. But this is why I say, like, I don't think every bank will just go to Ripple, right? I think at the end of the day, there will be some who will just be like, we're happy with Swift. We'll stick with Swift. And even if it is like, okay, it's 30 minutes, you got to understand that's still a big difference from 5 days. You know, the usual consensus to do a cross-border payment is 5 days. So changing that from 5 days down to 30 minutes, I think there's still a lot of banks that will be happy with that, right? So it is one of those things where even though Ripple would be the better option, because Swift has so much cachet and such a high stature within the community of first mover advantage, it's going to be hard to shake that, right? And that's why we say, you know, when there's other cryptocurrencies that come up against Ripple, you know, there's cryptocurrencies that want to come up against XRP and do cross-border payments. We say Ripple have been doing this with XRP for years now. They've got a huge first mover advantage, right? And then you've got to accept that's the same for Ripple going against Swift, right? People have been using Swift for many, many, many years now, decades. And so they've got that trust there with Swift. They're comfortable with Swift. So they may say, okay, Ripple is the better option, but we've been with Swift for so long that we're just comfortable with Swift. We know it works. We're happy with them. You know what I mean? We don't want to lose that relationship. We're happy with Swift. So, you know, this is why I'm just showing you, like, I don't think every bank is going to move over to XRP, but again, it doesn't have to be every bank. This is what I've been trying to stress to you guys. It doesn't have to be every bank for XRP to be successful. So you just got to understand that too, right? Like, I'm just trying to be as reasonable and rational as I can with you guys. I know some of you don't like to hear it, but I am just trying to show you, like, this is what we're dealing with in the real world. This is just what it is. But it really doesn't have to be such a negative thing. It just means you have to have a realistic mindset and understand the realities of this, which isn't so bad. It really isn't so bad. So, you know, thought I'd share this with you. And I hope, obviously, the advice I've given you here has helped. Thank you very much for watching this. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And hit that bell. Take care.